being in that world also. So glad to see sort of the two backgrounds I have coming together for this meeting.
Okay, thank y'all. So today's agenda, we are going to do a Pigeonhole live poll very quickly at the beginning of the meeting. They'll help us to know our audience a little bit, and this is a great tool that we've been using in this virtual engagement environment that we've had to move to. Just talk briefly about why we do community engagement, and then talk about some of our pre-COVID techniques. Then we're going to pivot to talking about our virtual engagement efforts and how a lot of the things that we were already doing in the virtual world really helped us when we did have to go to no more in-person community engagement situations. Then we'll talk about some project examples, and then at the end we're going to use Pigeonhole Live to do our Q&A. So with that, we will get started. So if you have a smartphone or you're on your computer, if you could go to www.pigeonhole.at, or you can use the QR code there and scan it, and that will take you directly there. You want to enter the passcode NYBBGA. So if you go to the opening poll, it says cast your vote. If you hit that button, it will take you into the questions. And you can see it pop up live on the screen, which is a great feature. So you can poll people in real time. And I definitely
We're asking for the code again.
It's at the top of the screen that's up there right now. It's NYBVGA. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like we've got a good mix of folks here today on the ITE side as well as planning side, so that's really great to see. And then in which sector do you work? It's mostly, looks like a good mix also of private, public, and then nonprofit. So thanks everybody for participating. Again, that's just a live demonstration of one of the many tools that we've been using as we've had to go to virtual engagement. So why do we do engagement, community engagement? I know, some of the transportation projects and things, maybe some people here don't really understand or don't have to do that sort of thing. So for us, it's very important just to learn more about the community where you're working. We come in as consultants, and sometimes people think, oh, they don't really know anything about our community. So it's very important that we talk to people and find out more about the community where we're working, find out all the little nuances that we might not be able to know or understand. It also allows us to create momentum for our planning process and our projects, and discover the advocates in the community that can help us move things forward and get the word out about the work that we're doing, and then also establish a framework to continue that engagement. So pre-COVID, we had really advanced our going out into the community and meeting people where they are. We felt like that is really important to reach a wide variety of people and go beyond the folks that will show up at your traditional community meeting. We were going out to parks, we go out to trails. For one of our projects, we were going out to shopping plazas, talking to people. We were doing a lot of pop-up events at festivals. You can see here, we were had a face painter at one of our booths at a festival, and we got kids to come over to get their faces painted, and we could talk to their parents about the project, as well as obviously other people that happened to walk by. But it was a really great way to get people to come over and talk to us about that particular project. And then we do a lot we were doing a lot of design charrettes, talking to people and getting their input and testing those ideas in real time. Then also just the traditional community meetings. Again, those are very important, as there are people who very much still like that format. We feel like it's really important to understand the history of the communities where we work. For the Gwinnett 2040 Unified Plan that we worked on, they were in the midst of celebrating their bicentennial. And so we set up a timeline of the 200-year history of Gwinnett County, and with various planning and development milestones, as well as what was going on in the world at the time. And so it really helped people to understand how much Gwinnett had grown through the years, especially for the newer residents, and just see how much it had expanded and grown. And then we asked people, what do you think will happen between now and 2040? And it was a great way to kind of get people thinking about the future, as a unified plan and a comp plan looks into the future. And so it helped get them in a frame of mind of thinking about how they wanted the county to grow over the next 20 years. We also did a timeline for the Path Lakewood plan, which you see on the right-hand side. Again, when you go into communities, there's often a lot of unwritten history that's important to know. And so, as well as planning things that happened in the past with planning processes, and it helped to build a timeline of that community that we were working in, and it helped really frame the plan and help the community felt like they were really invested in it. We also build a lot of awareness using online, social media, as well as we've actually, for a project that we just started down in South Fulton County, we actually did a mailer. And so it invites people to our virtual community meeting, which is coming up, and they can also scan that QR code and take our online survey and use a mapping tool called Social Pinpoint, which we started using a little over a year ago. And it has been a great tool to help crowdsource a bit. It's kind of like social media for planning projects. You can do these interactive maps, and people can drop markers and pins where they want to make a comment. This was for the Memorial Drive corridor study that you see on the screen. I think between all the public engagement that we were able to do in person for that project, as well as Social Pinpoint, we had over 7,000 comments, which is amazing. And you can also, we were also able to post meeting flyers and videos and just really keep people engaged in the process. And so having done all that already, before we got into the COVID environment that we're in now, it allowed us to really pivot into that virtual world very easily. So now I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Great, thank you, Lauren. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing now that we're in our COVID environment. And I'm going to start talking about some work we're doing for the city of Roswell. We were fortunate enough to be selected to work on the comprehensive plan, and we were just getting started. This image that you see here is on March 9th, which was our formal public hearing to kick off the project. If anyone's remembering sort of the time frame and of that week in March, March 9th was a Monday. March 11th was a Wednesday, and that was the night that I think everything kind of, people started to realize how serious this situation was, where the NBA canceled. I think President Trump was had a speech that evening, and then Tom Hanks announced that he had contracted the virus. All that kind of happened in like a 2-hour space, about two nights after we had our public kickoff. And at the time, we were planning to have a stakeholder meeting on March 24th, and we had our first round of community open houses planned for early May. But by the end of that week, we clearly realized that we were going to have to pivot and do some things differently. So on the next slide, and there's probably a little bit of a lag, we ended up doing our stakeholder meeting virtually, so very similar to what we're doing here, using Zoom. as sort of the general platform. But we use that Pigeonhole Live tool that you just saw to do a few things. One is to have a mechanism for people to ask questions. And one thing that we did not display with the software demo earlier is that people can ask questions, but people can also upvote and downvote questions that others have asked. So when we got to the end of our presentation, we were really able to understand not only the questions that people had, but also sort of the intensity and interest that different people had to those questions. We also use Pigeonhole Live to do a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats exercise, which you can see a screenshot of here. As you saw in the demo earlier, as we're doing these live pollings and things of that nature, the app and the widget associated with Pigeonhole Live automatically updates as information comes in. So it's really a great way, even though we're not together in the same room, to be able to collect that information and have everyone see it and be very transparent about what we're doing. And we also had some mapping homework in addition to the presentation, all the sort of conventional things that we did. But we had some mapping homework for the stakeholder group using the social pinpoint tool that I mentioned. And with this being a comprehensive plan and really thinking a lot about what the future of the community in Roswell looks like and sort of what development patterns they're interested in, mapping is really important to make sure we're able to get the appropriate input and feedback that we need. So we developed a whole sort of virtual version of the in-person exercise that we were planning, which you can see here, where people are able to put different pins down on a map of Roswell to indicate different interests and different likes relative to development patterns and what they like about the community and what they might think might need to be improved. Thinking a little bit about the public, we are in the sort of final stages of now releasing this tool and some broader sort of survey components and broader meeting sort of alternative meeting formats within the social pinpoint tool. We're in the midst of putting that out to the public probably the next week or two. But a starting point for that also is when we're doing everything virtually, it's really important to make sure we can get the word out. And in this virtual world, obviously we can take a lot of advantage of social media. So one thing that we're working with the city is to work with their community relations department to make sure that we're getting the information out. And we're creating collateral to help get that information out as well. So on the next screen, video should start playing. This is something that we're going to be putting out shortly to hopefully get people interested in what we're doing. And it looks like we're having the same audio issue, admittedly, which is ultimately okay because the audio is just music. That just makes it a little livelier. But basically, the point of this video, which also looks to be coming in a little bit choppy, unfortunately, is again just to communicate what the comprehensive plan is and why people should be interested in it. And as we get to the end of the video, we'll also explain how people can get involved. So this is something we have not rolled out 100% yet to the public, but we're in the final stages of being about to do that. So, from at least in terms of this project, and one of the things that we certainly stress is it's not just about having the tools and all the things ready. It's also about making sure that we have good strategy to make sure we get the word out. And I think this video will be wrapping up in a little bit. Lauren, you can cut it because the point is just to show that there's a video. And it's a tool to, again, get the word out. Speaking to that, once we do kind of open out everything for the public, we are using the social pinpoint tool, not just as a map. It has some other capabilities also, broad website capabilities where you can see from these screenshots here where we're communicating information about the project. So it's not just about getting input, it's also a mechanism to talk about what we're doing, explain the different phases of the work we're doing, and you can even see here we've been able to incorporate the video that we just showed you into the page. So we're playing some more videos also to kind of explain some of the planning techniques and planning perspectives. But it's really just a great one-stop shop to get all this information. And I do see a question coming in about social pinpoint working well on iPads. And yes, it's very device friendly. You can use it on your iPhone. It's even got components about with different languages will automatically translate into other languages. So if you're working in a community where you may have a lot of non-English speakers, it can be really helpful as well. But I think right now we're going to turn it over to Andrew Core to talk a little bit about some work we're doing for the Aerotropolis CID.
Thank you, Eric. And Allison, you bring up a great question in the chat about what do we do with folks without internet. And we'll talk about some ways we augment online education, online community engagement. The AeroATL Mile project is a project that is really sponsored by the Aero CIDs and the Aerotropolis Alliance. Looking at, they're working with 7 different communities, bringing them together to help develop model mile feasibility studies. So there was a vision plan done 2 years ago that was adopted and generated a lot of momentum about really building a greenway network in the South Metro area around the airport, and beginning to link these communities together and having them communicate and speak in one language, especially when it comes to trails and greenways. And so part of this is really one of the first projects where we had to really pivot when we were planning to do actually 2 typical our standard open house public forum meetings, just 2 for 7 communities that you could pick one that you wanted to attend. With COVID happening and these public places shutting down and there's people's reluctance to attend, we actually had to pivot, and actually it was beneficial for us. We went on to an online format. And one of the things we've learned as we've gone on is how we adapt to different types of technologies. We began doing these online formats using a WebEx program. It's something a lot of corporations use. But as we've learned with WebEx, it's very similar to Zoom or GoToMeeting. People didn't know what WebEx meant. The idea of Zoom has such a brand to it that everyone knows that. So even like today, we're now kind of transitioning over to using Zoom. So this was very much a work in progress and learning how to get people engaged. So we actually ended up doing 7 different online public forums, each directed at the individual communities. So it was much more targeted. We reached, I'd say, more than the traditional public forum, especially in a time of COVID. If we ended up having those public meetings, I think most people would have stayed home. Or they were, again, what we're seeing now happening is that when you're coming home from work after a long day, you've been on the computer all day, at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, you don't want to stare at your computer anymore. So the idea of the traditional meeting at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock has, not that it's gone away, but we've been experimenting with daytime presentations, weekend presentations, and different times of the day to engage people. And we can also actually keep it to 1 hour. We typically find with 1 hour presentations. So this is a project in the city of, this is one of the model miles of the city of Atlanta. This is an area called Adams Park, which really trying to link Campbellton Road, which has a high number of MARTA users, very few sidewalks. If you look at that picture on the bottom right-hand side, very poor connectivity, bike lanes, but no sidewalks, which is very ironic in Atlanta. And but a lot of great assets. So if you, Lauren, if you go to the next screen. So just to kind of give you some context, and just to kind of, Adams Park is a historic neighborhood, a lot of green space and open space, from Greenwood Cemetery, Casper Springs Nature Preserve, AT Homes Golf Course, Adams Park. There's a lot of history here, dating back to the Civil War and to the 20th century and the Civil Rights era. So there's a lot of things to capture. So we actually used images like this on the screen, but using online public engagement, we were able to target our audience to actually zoom in and zoom out in the PowerPoint presentation itself, to actually talk about specific items and elements. And when you're doing online presentations, what we found is that whereas if there's a lot of information for someone to disseminate and to take in at one time, so you really have to simplify the presentation. If you're doing a traditional town hall, you can actually go and take your time and choose what you want to view. Well, in an online presentation, you're actually just receiving information from the presenter. So you really have to kind of really simplify and target key points. It really helps, forces everyone to articulate what we're speaking about. So we go to the next slide, Lauren. So we use Pigeonhole Live here too. This is a video we're gonna play. There is no audio. It's really just showing in real time. We kind of shortened this entire video of how we did the Q&A after this public forum. So when you do a Q&A like this in Pigeonhole Live, you're actually able to select a photo, vote on questions. We're actually able to moderate those questions and administer them so we make sure that they're appropriate. they don't have profanity or inappropriate, and before they go online, then people vote. The idea is that you actually, you allow people, and it's what we say is democratizing the experience, right? So we know how those typical public meetings are. There's the same few people, they're loud, they dominate the conversations, they really can draw people down a rabbit hole. The idea here is really to give someone who has the quietest voice in the room the ability to answer a question and really be heard. And potentially those questions are ones that are popular, questions that people really want to see answered, but they're afraid to ask. So they can vote on those. You can comment on these. And all of this is actually moderated. And then the best part about this is it's all documented. So at the end of the day, we have a record of who asked the question, if you want to put your name in there, what question was asked, how many people voted on it, the popularity of the question, and then we actually develop a response to that. So it's all documented. So it's great for, if you're doing something at, whether it's a traditional public open house or getting information, you have that record data that you can attach to documents and reports. So I wonder if you don't mind going to the next slide. So really it's been a huge, and I'm going to transition back over to Eric. It's really been a really great resource and something that's not the be all and end all, but it's another tool in the toolkit. So with that, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So we're also doing some work for the city of Woodstock, and I see some of our friends from Woodstock online, so appreciate you being here. The city was fortunate enough to be awarded a Smart Communities Challenge grant last year, and we were hired to assist as part of that effort to help really with the planning process to help them understand what type of smart technologies they may want to implement in the city, and very specifically also in the downtown corridor area. These grants are pretty interesting because it's really it involves Georgia Tech researchers and people from the community, and it just involves a lot of different people and perspectives. So we're really fortunate and excited to be part of it. But on the next slide, our focus was again a planning process to help assist the city in understanding what directions they may want to go in. And obviously, in something like this, we really thought it was important to make sure we were getting some good community input. So we were fortunate enough that we were able to start this process pre-COVID back in late 2019, and we had a combination of an online survey using the social pinpoint tool that we've been referencing quite a bit, and then also some in-person intercept interviews that many folks from city staff and other people involved with the grant helped out with. And we basically just had kind of an overall ranking exercise that we used to understand where the priorities of the community might be and how that might relate to smart technology. And I think that's a really important point that, sometimes as planners and just people who are out there communicating to the public and trying to get input, we run the risk of forgetting, which is that, we're out there to get information, and we're also have a responsibility and an obligation to make sure we use that information. So we really wanted to make sure that our questions and ideas were very succinct and really, really straightforward, and also designed to be usable in our process. So we were able to use this information. If you go to the next slide, we were able to use this information to really, again, inform kind of the general ideas that were of interest in the community. And we found that a lot of interest in just sort of transportation and pedestrian bicyclist movements and parking in the downtown area were certainly things that rose to the top. And this really helped us pivot to the online mapping tool that we've shown you a couple of times now. I hope many of you have been to downtown Woodstock. It's a really great place, lots of cool restaurants, really just great walkable environment, lots of things to see and do. Parking, there's lots of parking in downtown Woodstock. Let's make that clear. But if you want your prime parking spot right in front of the business that you might be going to, you may or may not be successful. So parking is a hot topic in downtown Woodstock, and we use this tool to ask a variety of questions, parking being one of them. But in this example, you can see here on the screen, we asked some questions specifically about parking and had people put down pins about parking. And the image on the left is actually a heat map of where people indicated their preferences were to park, which, it's the type of thing that we sort of know when we're looking at the community, we're understanding things, but it really helps us understand that when people want to park, these are the places they're going to first. And so we understand how that starts to create circulation and transportation challenges. We also understand how that relates to once people are once they do get out of their cars, how they may be walking to the businesses and places that they're frequenting. So that's another question that we asked that we're able to connect with this whole survey tool. And you can see the panel on the right is one of the comments that are related to sort of the visibility of crossings. So that's something else we're looking at as part of this project. And I want to bring your attention to a really interesting component of the social pinpoint tool that I don't believe you've mentioned yet, which is the fact that similar to the pigeonhole tool, people are able to upvote and downvote comments. So this gives us a great way to not just get comments, but kind of similar to pigeonhole, understand what sort of the appetite in the general community is. So you can see this particular comment had 7 additional likes. You can also see the Facebook and Twitter icons there. So there's lots of interaction with social media for those who choose to, post and then go on Facebook and say, hey, I just commented on the Smart Woodstock interactive map. So it's just another way to make sure we're leveraging all the tools that we have. And should mention that I know Lauren referred to when we used this tool on the Memorial Drive plan that we did last year, how that related to the number of comments. But on this project, one thing we're really excited about is that we didn't have quite those number of comments, but we had 181 people put pins down. So that's great. But the value of the up and down voting is that we had 836 additional upvotes and downvotes on those comments. So we get a good sense of what the comments are, but then again, we get to really understand through all that up and down voting what people are really thinking. And next slide. All right, I think, Andrew, it's you again.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. I think this goes back to something that one of the participants asked about, the idea of like, how do you deal with areas that people don't have access to internet? So, and we're always trying to find different ways to augment the online. Online and digital is great, but there's certain people who just don't have that access. This is a project that is actually a multi-jurisdictional project between the city of Chattahoochee Hills and the city of South Fulton. They're working jointly on an area known as Campbellton Crossroads. Now I'll show you a picture in a minute of this, but Campbellton Crossroads is it's really the gateway, the gateway into Fulton County if you're coming from Douglas County, right along the Chattahoochee River there, which you see in the bottom middle of the screen. So this is a historic community. For you history buffs, the Campbell County was the original county seat before Campbell County got pulled into what is now Fairburn. Sorry, not Fairburn, Fulton County. And so this was the original county seat back in the 1830s, 1820s, 1830s. It was founded. Very early community, and actually still had until the 1950s a ferry crossing that was manually overseen by a gentleman there on the river. So it has a lot of history there. A lot of it's been gone. They're trying to look at how do we capture the history, but tell that story and actually develop a small area plan that considers the market realities, but also can spur appropriate redevelopment that is historically appropriate. So again, in these rural areas, we have a very different constituency base. People are more spread out. It's not as urban. Broadband is a challenge. Older residents potentially. And you have different users like on the left-hand side, folks who are who's cycling. So different people who use this on different times of the day, on the weekend, and things like that. So you go to the next slide, Lauren. So just to kind of give you an idea, to begin thinking about how we have a broader reach, we begin trying to understand where, who are the core users and the people in the community. And this really kind of shows the context of Campbellton, where it is, to give everyone some idea. This is a great place for if you're looking to take a day trip with the family and get out of the house. South Fulton County and Douglas County down in this area, this is a great place to go take a day trip and see kind of some of the hidden areas of our Atlanta region, which is it's a really beautiful area. And this really kind of gives you context how rural it is. And so thinking about how we kind of broaden our reach. Go to the next slide. So part of what we're doing with the online engagement is really having to reintroduce history and compare that history to the realities of what's going on there today. What you see on the screen is actually the original grid from Campbellton, the original layout from the 1830s, which we've overlaid on the current layout configuration of the roadways there. So you have a high trafficked area. It's a gateway, a lot of truck traffic. And this is then offset by the real historic nature of the area. A lot of it's very few remnants of it being preserved. So we begin to use these visuals, especially in an online setting, to introduce to the broader community kind of the history of the area that you really can't see a lot of, and talking about how the roadway network, the transportation network, actually tells a really important story about the history. But then also thinking about online, how do we engage folks? And if you go to the next slide, Lauren, as Lauren showed, building this timeline out. And the challenge we have here is we have a history that we have a known history of this area that's really focused on Campbellton, but there's all this unwritten oral history that we really want to capture. So similar to what Lauren spoke about that they did for the Grant Unified Plan and the Path Lakewood project, we're actually doing this for this project as well. We're actually going to have to augment the online learning, going to have we're having a charrette-based process. So it'll be a 3-day online charrette workshop where we'll do live check-ins with the community. People can come in during the middle of the day. We can kind of check in, as well as targeted stakeholder interviews throughout the day. But as part of the pre-charrette activity, we still want people to visit the site, because visiting the site will actually give you a real value and understanding of what we're trying to do there. So we're actually, in an area like this, we can actually do some social distancing and actually have people kind of have stations where people can actually come and visit during the day, on a Saturday, on the weekend. They can bring their family. They can learn about the history, visit the Chattahoochee, which who doesn't love to do that, and really get out and get in nature. But also introduce this timeline and really make it personal for everybody. So taking something that, while it's great online and we can see this, it's really cool graphically, actually taking pen to paper and saying, what is your personal history? And that's really important for both communities, so we can get on beyond just the Campbellton area, but understanding what's the history of the broader area around it, and really begin capturing that importance. So that'll be something we're trying to really augment and create that personal touch. So to get to people to come to the site, if you go to the next screen, Lauren, is as she showed, kind of the postcard idea. And what we're really trying to do here is to first off, give someone a contact. So you have someone to reach out to and communicate with, a real human being, not just something online. So we have the name of the client names and contacts, as well as Lauren's contact information. But also then if they're willing to go and actually go to the actual website and begin using Social Pinpoint, engaging the website, and then actually inviting them to the virtual community meeting. And because broadband is limited in these rural areas, the city of Chattahoochee Hills has offered to actually open up their city hall space, if there's a need, and actually have people come in and actually participate in the virtual community meeting in a community space that where you're still socially distancing and sitting around from one another. So there's still space, it's very safe. So trying to find ways to do that. And I think especially that's going to be more appropriate even going on kind of post COVID, once the pandemic is addressed, is actually creating these settings where you can actually bring people into a room, or in a safe way. Let's say you imagine you have a group of an older population in a residential care facility, and they're active and they want to be engaged, but they can't attend online. You can actually get them in a room together, right? Imagine that. Or you're working with a community advocate, and they're actually going to working as a community resource to bring people together and bring those resources to them. The same can be said for bringing the internet to folks. So if they're coming to a virtual, to an in-person meeting, we can bring the internet and the technology with us so they can engage. What we're learning is that both, a lot of people have smartphones, but there's still a lot of people, even if you have a smartphone, they're not used to doing virtual engagement this way. So it's different for them. So if you go to the final slide, Lauren. And this is just this is the beginning of a process. And obviously these are areas that, we're just, one of the things, we're trying to do here is really try to capture another way to capture the tools is say, what is that? You see that the yellow area, the important to Campbellton history. Hopefully people will be able to go online and give us other history and historic ideas about this area to really build some community pride. So the beauty of social pinpoint, I think, again, is it's really flexible. That it can be, you can use it to target specific information regarding different tools. So again, I think it's a really cool tool. And I think we're really excited about seeing how this is going to work in a rural setting, an area we're trying to use lots of different resources to connect with folks. So with that, Lauren, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Oh, I'm sorry, over to Eric. Sorry.
Yep, we got one more to go through quickly. And I think, hopefully something that you've seen is, even though we're using really just one or two tools beyond just sort of the general engagement platforms like Zoom and WebEx, we're able to apply these tools for multiple different types of projects. So to kind of bring it more into a topic that a lot of the transportation engineers on here may be explicitly interested in, is how do you work with this when you're putting together, say, a concept and you're trying to get feedback. So as you can see from this screenshot, we were working on a corridor plan that involved developing a concept for State Route 9 up in Forsyth County. And we were actually able to take the line work that our roadway design engineers were able to put together for that concept, and we were able to basically translate it into GIS, which then allows us to put it into social pinpoint tools. So you can see that here on the screenshot. And the reason we did this, well, not only because we had to be virtual, in this particular project, we had a pretty tight schedule. We were looking to do sort of a final public information open house, just to get kind of final comments in April. The contract was running out in terms of time, for a very tight time frame. So we immediately effectively had to pivot to this tool. So we set up the social pinpoint tool to be a virtual PIOH, and really to simulate all the things you would encounter in a normal PIOH, but just in a virtual setting. And quite frankly, I think it was a great success. As you can see, in many ways, there's probably a lot of value to for people being able to view it this way, as opposed to on a static map where you kind of have to, walk as close up to the map as possible to see the detail. With the social pinpoint tool, people are able to zoom in, zoom out. They're able to see it on top of aerial photography from Google that they're probably used to seeing, because it's effectively a Google map underneath. You go to the next slide. Just a few more screenshots from this. So, using this in this format, gave us comments such as this one here that related to access to a couple of churches on the corridor. So it was really useful in the ways that you want public involvement to be useful, in the sense that we had a concept, but we got comments and were able to receive comments that really helped us understand, okay, we might need to think about the access here and how people are coming out of the church and what their movements might be. These are things we're doing in a concept process anyways, but the public involvement piece is to make sure we're hearing it from people and thinking about how that works. And on the next slide, I think we have just another screenshot, zooming in real tight. Again, just to convey, how close you can zoom in. At this particular location, the road we're proposing, again, this is a very high level concept, but proposing to do some realignment to get that intersection not skewed so much. And there's a cemetery kind of right here in the mix. So we received a variety of comments and questions about that. So it just gave us it gave us that mechanism you're looking for in your conventional formats to make sure that we're hearing the comments and we're responding to them appropriately. And, I will add that we had a conventional public meeting on this particular project in February, late February, just before COVID hit. And I think we had something like 15 people sign in, which is kind of, pretty typical. Let's be honest, for a lot of these meetings, unless you're, you have the right-of-way map and you're taking someone's home, people tend not to come out for a meeting like that. So, relatively modest crowd. But when we put it out on the survey, we had 80 pins, so about 80 people commenting in that regard, and then another 366 up and down votes for a total of 446 overall comments. So, I think, especially when it's used in communities where we know people have the web access, quite frankly, I think it's a mechanism to get more input and arguably better input. Certainly, as we return to a world that is hopefully normal soon, and we're doing our in-person stuff, I think at the very least, these are tools that as a profession, we should be taking with us and using to supplement the types of things we do. And to wrap it up on the next slide, just here's something we happened to discover. A comment from a Forsyth County resident on that State Route 9 plan when the county had put out a blast to say, hey, please take the interactive map and survey. And you can read the comment. This is a much better open house than actual in-person open houses. Much easier to see the information and give specific comments. So we're really elated to see that, because that's certainly the way I feel. And I think a lot of folks in our team feel this way, that, you know, certainly the times are challenging, especially with making sure that we're being transparent and we're meeting our obligation to incorporate people's thoughts and opinions in the work we're doing. But when we see something like this, we know that we're meeting the opportunity head on and being successful at it. And that's all I got, I think.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. So now we can go to our live Q&A, and I think some people have already started putting questions in. So if you go back to pigeonhole.at and you can go to the Q&A session. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you type your question and then you hit the ask button to submit. And so we've already got a couple questions here popping up. Can I use EPA grants to buy a subscription to Social Pinpoint? Does anybody know? Eric or Andrew? I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, I can't speak to whatever regulatory restrictions may or may not be on using grants for the tool, but I will add that the tool is, I think very, very reasonably priced. In our case, we do purchase a subscription, which gives us a number of projects / slots we can open up a year. The more slots you open, the more economical it is, but there's also mechanisms to just purchase a single slot if you have kind of a single project. One thing I should add about Social Pinpoint, and I know we're saying a little bit like Social Pinpoint salespeople, that's not really our intent, but one thing that is great about the tool is that for instance, if you're a municipality and you're doing lots of different things, if you were to purchase a subscription, they have a lot of sort of CRM capabilities and things of that nature that kind of are able to track sort of participation amongst your community. So as consultants, that's useful and interesting to us. But if you've got like a long-term investment, you're doing lots of different things in the community, that's certainly another advantage to that particular tool. I will also add that, Social Pinpoint is just one of many tools. So this is the one that we found worked best for us. But depending on your specific needs, there are certainly other tools that have similar capabilities and components with online and interactive mapping. So this is just the one that we happen to use and feel works for us.
Okay. What about more disenfranchised neighborhoods where online engagement can be a challenge?
Hey, Lauren, I want to say something about that and kind of mention it with Campbellton Crossroads a little bit, but Pigeonhole on all these tools are great, but to the degree that we also need champions in the community to connect us to those resources and promote it, right? So that relies on city staff and others and elected officials to help promote, certainly on the online tool, but also this brings up more and more the idea that there's a big gap in equity. And so, to the degree we can identify and understand who those key community advocates are that can make those connections within disenfranchised neighborhoods. If we don't know who they are, who those community members are, but we have access to them through community advocates, that's where the real victory is to make those connections happen. Because many of those people are not traditionally do not participate in the planning process. And I will say that then becomes a situation where I like a better word using kind of like retail politics, meaning that it's really more one-on-one conversations, and you're sometimes even asking different questions to seek the answers you need. And so they have to be very targeted too. So you obviously can't, it takes a little more time and energy, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to note that we have to be really sensitive to how we address equitable issues.
Okay. Somebody loves Woodstock Smart City. That's great. How much does a subscription cost? I'm not sure, Eric.
Uh,
There's different levels.
yeah, quite frankly, it just depends on how many slots you want to buy. There's different tiers. So, you know, again, as I was saying earlier, it's more economical. The more slots you're going to be using, the more economical it becomes for your agency. But again, I think on a, you know, kind of per project basis, especially if you are maximizing your subscription, as we're very careful to do, it's incredibly economical on a project by project basis, in my opinion. Certainly, you can go to their website, and I think all their pricing or the current pricing's on there. And if not, their people, I'm sure will be more than happy to engage with you on your interest.
Lauren, Sam had a question in the Zoom chat that said, you know, in our experience, are we getting more engagement on these kind of virtual Zoom meetings versus in-person meetings? And I would say yes.
Yes.
It depends on the, you're kind of getting an add bonuses, as Eric mentioned. You're getting someone participating with comments and feedback, but then you're getting the person coming behind them and voting up or down that idea. Getting more, you're kind of building community buy-in versus simply a single dot on a map. That is more traditional way of thinking.
Yeah, I'll also add, I think the reality we're in, it allows us to be a little more flexible. The conventional meeting, it's usually it's very static, right? It's at a specific time. It's typically, you know, 5 to 7, 6 to 8, 7 to 9 in the evening. It's in a very specific location that may or may not work for people's schedules. With this type of, you know, by using Zoom and all sort of this other collateral that we tend to use, you know, it allows, well, people to do it on their time in many cases, but even if we are having a very specific time for a Zoom meeting, it's a lot easier and more, you know, efficient, to be straightforward about it, for us to do 3 quick Zoom meetings at various different times of the day than, you know, pack up the car with all the materials and this and that and drive to an off-site location and sit there and, you know, maybe get a few people come in and then do, you know, another version of that in another location. So it allows us to be a little more efficient also. So I think there's a component where it's not just, you know, meeting, you know, comparing an in-person meeting to a single online Zoom meeting, but also the added flexibility of doing things in this more virtual environment, that it just allows us to be more adaptable and more sensitive to people's schedules and when they may or may not be able to get together. You may have noticed with the Campbellton project that Andrew was talking about earlier, and I know he talked a little bit about this, but that meeting was a lunchtime meeting, the time that it was set up at. So, you know, a lot of it allows us to just be a little more flexible and adaptable to the community's needs and when it's going to be convenient for people to be out there.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you all taking the time to present today about how y'all have been virtually engaging the community. And thank you everyone for your questions. And GPA, we appreciate you joining us another year for another meeting. And you know, if there are no more questions, the link for the PDH survey is in the chat. So if you would like to get your PDHs, please go ahead and get on there. I'm going to try something one more time on our end to see about getting sound done on the thing, just so we can share the video from our sponsor, KCI, one more time. So go ahead and do that, then play.
Good afternoon from KCI. This is Andrew Antweiler. Holly Painter, Mike Bush, and Chuck Bailey, and the rest of the Georgia staff say hello. KCI is proud to support the Georgia section of IT and today's webinar. We wanted to say thank you to Kate Sheeran, the IT board, and IT volunteers for modifying plans and continuing to offer meetings and conferences. Now, for a little bit about KCI. We are a growing full-service engineering firm with over 1,700 employees. We're also 100% employee-owned and rank among the top engineering firms in the country. We serve many clients in Georgia and enjoy finding solutions to meet their needs. KCI provides many services, including many aspects of transportation, utilities, and survey, including cool drone footage. Now I look forward to learning from my friends at Pond about how to communicate while wearing a mask. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, one more time for participating in today's webinar. Andrew, Lauren, Eric, thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and conclude the meeting here. Thank you.
Thank you.